This is Twit.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to have you.
Yeah, so you were at WWDC. Like the rest of our developer guests, you did not actually have a ticket. It seems like
You're kidding. You flew all the way and you couldn't go see it?
Well, I did it last year as well. And honestly, it's in some ways more fun to just sit in a hotel room with a bunch of friends and get amazed by things together, because also I was in the room with Alex Cox when she found out that Dubai Friday was featured in the keynote. So watching her get very excited about that was good fun. And I wouldn't have seen that if I was actually in the keynote hall. So I might have actually been missing out.
You fly to San Jose to sit in a hotel room and watch the keynote.
Why not?
It is true that for a lot of conventions and conferences, the best part is reuniting with old friends and you know, gathering together and stuff like that.
And you had a meetup, you had a RelayFM meetup, and you went to other events, and you spoke to some of the creators of Shortcuts.
Yes, I did. So I was very fortunate to run into a lot of the Shortcuts team around San Jose, and they were super excited about all these updates that they've got, showing me all the cool new actions that they've added and how Shortcuts works differently to how it worked before, which was really good fun to talk to them about. I
was really excited when they announced Shortcuts, because it felt to me like a major step forward for iOS. You know, and I'm sure you're the same way, a fan of AppleScript and then Automator, and I was really worried when they let go of Sal Soghoian, who was the king of both. I thought, oh no, is Apple turning away from automation? And Sal said, don't worry, because so many people on macOS use automation. But I had no idea that the iOS team was also working on Shortcuts. And I think they've done a very good job.
I would agree. And I mean, in some ways, it's kind of a shame that last year the team got so much keynote time, whereas this year they got hardly any. But in many ways, the updates to Shortcuts this year are significantly larger than they were last year.
That's so Apple.
Well, they kind of had this new, very expensive computer that I'm guessing that they wanted to demo to their audience.
So yeah, they obviously spent more time on, but you know, it was clear at the keynote they had a lot to say, and they had only 2.5 hours to say it, and they really were jamming through it. So I'm actually not surprised. But fortunately, we have Rosemary Orchard to tell us all the new features.
Mm-hmm. So what are the new things that are coming?
Should I open Create Shortcuts so you can show us, walk us through some of the new?
Unless you're running iOS 13, you're not going to see the first thing that I'm talking about at all.
Okay, something to look forward to.
Yeah, something to look forward to. So at the bottom of Shortcuts at the moment, there's two tabs. There's your library and the gallery. And what they've done in iOS 13 is those two have just moved out a little bit to make room for a new one in the middle called Automations. Ooh. And this one allows you to, as you may guess from the name, automate your shortcuts. So you can, for example, when you open an app, have it do something like start a timer and a time tracking system for you, so that when you're invoicing a client later, you know how much time you actually worked on it. And when you get to a location or you leave a location, you can have it send a message. And when it reads an NFC tag, it can run a shortcut. And home automations have moved in there as well. So you can create automations that you share with people versus the ones that you keep to yourself, which is pretty awesome.
This is actually a huge update, because inter-process automation has always been very challenging on iOS. And so are they using a URL scheme, or do they have something built in that's a little more powerful?
I believe that they're actually using the things built right into the base of the operating system. I have not dived into this to find out exactly how it's working, but it does seem to be working on similar to something like a cron job, which you might have running on a server that just runs automatically based on time. But this doesn't just run based on time. It's running based on location and NFC tags and Wi-Fi networks and Bluetooth devices and all sorts of things. So when you put in your AirPods, you can have it play your favorite playlist.
That's huge.
Yeah. So massive.
So that's really good. So yeah, because the OS knows a lot about what's going on in the world. It knows when you plug in your headphones or you open up your AirPods. But in the past, it's been kind of siloed away only for Apple to see. But now developers can see it too. That's incredible.
Yeah, that is. And because Shortcuts now comes pre-installed on every device as well, you don't need to tell people to go download it from the App Store. You can just send them a shortcut, assuming that you've gone through settings with them and enabled untrusted shortcuts, because that is also now a thing. If it doesn't come from the gallery, then you have to turn on the ability to accept these, which I feel is a good feature as well, because it remove some of the potential security risk, because it could theoretically start saving all of your calendar information into a text file and save a Dropbox and get that information, send a message in the background to somebody.
As you make shortcuts more powerful, you also have to make them more secure. And we've talked about that on the show before, because I like to go to the Shortcuts subreddit and download shortcuts. And that is potentially hugely dangerous if you're not careful and don't review the shortcuts. So I think this is a smart thing. But I'm thrilled that Apple is basically putting Gatekeeper, the Mac OS security system, into shortcuts. And I'm thrilled that Apple did that instead of saying, no, we better keep it only to the gallery. So that's really good news.
Yeah. I mean, I do wish they'd added a shortcut store. They've got an iMessage app store. Why couldn't they have a shortcut store where I, as a developer, could then submit shortcuts so that people could then, it could go through app review, it could get that verification from Apple, and then people could download it. I'd be perfectly happy to do all of that for free, because I make shortcuts and give them away to people for free anyway. So being able to submit them to Apple would be an extra step that I feel that it would have been very nice, but that's not there yet. Maybe next year.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do that eventually.
Yeah.
I think the real question for me on shortcuts is uptake. And this was a problem with Automator as well. Apple has done a great job. They've made a really great utility, but I think it's a little more complicated. It's not real easy to use, and I would guess 90%, maybe 99% of iOS users don't use shortcuts. We're always lobbying to get. It's the power users that use them, but honestly, I think everybody can benefit from them.
Yeah, and from iOS 13 onwards, it will be pre-installed on every device. So when you download iOS 13, if you don't have shortcuts installed, it will install it for you.
Excellent.
As I discovered because I was running the test flight version, and I ended up with 2 versions of shortcuts on my iPad when I installed it on day one. Which is a lesson to everybody.
That'll help a lot because you had to download it before, so that'll help an awful lot. That's great.
Yeah,
it's really gone beyond. Shortcuts was really workflow when they bought Workflow. But it seems like it's really gone well beyond now what Workflow. Is there anything from Workflow you miss in Shortcuts?
I mean, the ability to talk to the developers more easily, perhaps. But they're still very receptive to feedback. And if you use the Apple feedback filer, some of the developers have publicly said on Twitter, don't forget to send us the feedback. We really do want this. So now that they're on the iOS development cycle, they need to get it in by the time iOS is ready to ship. They can't miss that deadline. So if there's feedback, they really want it. And I'm very pleased to hear, because I was talking to some of the team and they were very excited, saying, send us radar for this, send us feedback on that and things like that. So I've done all of that.
I've just airdropped Megan a random meme.
Yeah, you did just airdrop me a meme.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I look at these shortcuts and I go, I have to do that.
Yeah, thanks. So on the security aspect, just to be clear, so unlike the App Store, they'll just warn you if it comes from a third party, but then you get to decide whether you want to install it or not.
Yeah. So what happens is if you try and install a shortcut, then it pops up and it tells you what services it needs access to. So it will tell you if it needs to access your calendar, reminders, OmniFocus, contacts, and things like that. And you can choose whether or not to install it. But in the settings application, Shortcuts has now moved from inside of settings, you've got a list of all of the Apple applications like calendar, reminders, and then below that there's a list of all the other applications. Shortcuts has moved from there up to the Apple section, and it's in there now, and you can turn on and off to allow sharing and receipt of untrusted shortcuts, which means that also if you want to share your shortcuts, you need to turn that on. So of course that's the first thing I did.
Okay, so Leo has been in search of a shortcut, as you know now from personal experience.
Finally, we get an expert on.
He is often late, and so we have no idea when he's going to get here.
I texted you today, but I had to do it like a savage by
like
hand,
an animal. So
typing it in.
Is there a way for an automated text message to say, Megan, I'm on my way. I'm so sorry. I'll never be late again until next week, or something like that?
And let's add a little fillip. I'd love to do a glimpse-style pin that says that she can look at and says she can see me making my way here, so she knows if I'm lying, for instance. In fact, it'd be great if that pin could show I'm in the shower. Because usually that's what I text you is before I get in the shower.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it could know if he's lying or
I'll
not.
be there any minute now.
Okay. So
all right, but give us the first part, and then we can figure out a way to get the second part in.
Well, the first part is definitely possible. Right now, if you want to do this as of the moment that we are talking, you need to use if, this, and that.
Right.
As of iOS 13 in September, you should be able to, and this is assuming that everything stays as it is and any kinks in the system are worked out before then, be able to create an automation that says, when I leave my house, send Megan a message. Yes. And, well, it might not be able to do the location right away. What you could do is you could have it generate a random number, multiply it by 10, and then say, I owe you X dollars. Or cookies, depending on.
Multiply it by 10 cents. Okay. 10 quid.
$10,000. 10 more years that you continue to work here without retiring.
Oh, that's good. That's what she really wants. That's what she really wants. Subtract 10 from my age, maybe. Yeah. That is really good. That is a good example of what we can't do now, but we'll be able to do in iOS 13. Get access to these system-level information. That's going to really, I think, explode what you can do with shortcuts.
Yes. And actually what you can also do is when it turns off your alarm in the morning, it can actually go through and it can run a shortcut from then as well. So it can even remind you, by the way, you've got a show at 9:30, which means that you need to leave the house at 8:30 and things like that. And then it can also set alarms or reminders and ping you at those times. Which may be useful or not.
I'm going to just send texts to Megan. Leo's alarm has gone off.
Mm-hmm.
Leo is snoozing.
Yeah.
Leo is snoozing again.
Mm-hmm.
Leo
Actually,
is getting...
you can do it based on the snooze button as well. So.
See?
Yeah.
Leo is frying some eggs.
Yes.
Leo is sipping his coffee.
Right.
Leo's having another coffee.
Wear your Apple Watch in the shower. Like if it gets wet, then you could
Leo's
automatically...
watch is wet.
Yeah. I don't know if Watch is getting wet because one thing I do miss from Workflow is they had an Apple Watch app, which Shortcuts does not have. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can trigger things, by talking to your Apple Watch. But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like a bit of a dork talking to my Apple Watch in public, especially when it then talks back to me. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't need you to talk to me right now. Like sometimes it's useful to just shut
Apple has a fix for that. Keep your AirPods in at all times.
Yeah. Then you have to talk to your AirPods. That's worse.
Yeah, I mean, though the AirPods are really good at taking over from the Hey Siri, because that's the other element of this. If you've got 7 or 8 devices, which some of us may have, and they're all running iOS 13, and they walk
your watch is talking to you. Your watch just talked to you.
There you go. Demonstrating exactly why I don't like that feature.
You know what? I can't get Siri to respond at all.
I was really surprised because we try to have people not say the Amazon wake word because it does wake everything up. But
we don't care about Siri.
But Siri, it's always never wakes.
Well, the thing is because this is an Apple Watch. If you lift it at the right angle to talk to it, I'm doing it with the wrist that's not wearing the watch now. Then
you can't
then
turn that off. But you like it, obviously. Yeah, you actually like that, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so it's useful until it's randomly starts talking during the podcast.
I have to say, I have so many devices from all the manufacturers in my office here, in my office at home, that I am so used to things just randomly speaking to me all the time.
Sometimes that's me.
It gets a bit creepy after a while, though.
No, but that's the thing. I'm used to it now. They're my little friends.
Those two gremlins running around.
My little friends, yes. Yeah. What are some of the features of iOS 13's shortcuts that you are most excited about? Give me an example of a routine that you're most excited about.
Well, one of the ones I've been using a lot because I do have iOS 13 installed on a few devices, not all of them, because I need to do a presentation next week, which involves using devices that are stable. Of course. But on some of the devices, I've installed iOS 13, so I've got the new shortcuts. And one of the ones I've been using is the one which triggers a couple of HomeKit scenes, and it also AirPlays music to my HomePod, because now you can set an AirPlay destination, which is great, so that you can actually have it. And if I was slightly more mobile, I could have it where I come through the door, set my AirPlay destination from my AirPods to my HomePod, and when I leave, do the inverse.
So you come home, you're listening to music, and you're listening to your fine podcast, and you come home, you open the door, and automatically your phone will say, "Oh, Rosemary's home," and then we'll start playing it through your HomePod.
Yeah, so if you could have it do that when you connect to a specific Wi-Fi network or when you get to a specific location. it depends on what you need.
So when I get to work, I can have it play my theme song in my ears as I walk in the door.
Like, the Darth Vader theme song.
Yeah, dum, 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 pum, pum, pum. Actually, that's a great idea. That's going to be my theme song. That's really cool.
Saying he's going to have it play the Star Wars theme tune as soon as he got home every time. So.
What else? Give me some more. These are the new shortcuts in iOS 13. But before you say that though, how is it not super stable iOS 13? We're going to get a public beta next month, I think. And should we not do it?
So I would highly advise people to wait for the public beta unless there's a very, very good reason to install the developer beta, such as being a developer.
Right. Which you are. You have to. You're developing shortcuts.
I am a developer.
Yeah.
And so I've installed it on a few devices, but it will mess up your iOS 12 devices as well. If you've got the iOS 13 beta installed, and getting my iCloud Drive to work again took me a good couple of hours across all my devices, and that was not fun. So I highly recommend waiting. Last year was an anomaly with it being so stable so early. This year it's back to its usual wobbly self, and I am not criticizing Apple with that. It is a developer beta. We should expect it to be wobbly, and in general, wait for the public beta.
Okay, because what you've just described makes me desperately want this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So a few other things that you can do is you can also do things like set a wallpaper. So when you turn off your alarm every day, you could actually have it say check for NASA's image of the day, grab it and set it to be your iPhone wallpaper, and then have it grab, I don't know, the cutest cat of the day. I'm sure there's a feed for that somewhere, and set that to your lock screen wallpaper and things like that, which is also very nice.
Brilliant. I need that. Computers will do that, but to have a mobile device do that. And that would be true for an iPad or an iPhone, right?
Yeah, it would.
Wow.
So.
I really like that. Is there anything in iPad OS that's different in iPad OS from what you can do on the iPhone?
Well, there's a couple of things you can't do, which is health stuff. So this has been true for quite some time. You can't do any of the health things on an iPad because your health info is only on an iPhone.
Right.
I am hoping that they're going to fix that at some point, because there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to view my health information on an iPad. Right. Imagine viewing your EKG or ECG, depending on your language, on your iPad. That would be so much better than an iPhone, which, even if you've got a nice XS Max, it's still not huge.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense if you have an iPad and an iPhone that they can't the health should have the same information on both. Yeah.
So,
same, just as the watch communicates with the phone, why wouldn't the phone communicate with the iPad?
Yes. And speaking of the watch, you can actually have a trigger. So when you start or end a workout on your Apple Watch, that can trigger shortcuts as well.
So it could say, what a good boy I am?
Yeah, and it could also start your workout playlist.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Or order pizza.
Yeah.
I'll
be needing pizza in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And Apple Pay the cash to the delivery person.
Can you automate Apple Pay?
That's been in there for some time, being able to send money via, I believe, Venmo, Apple Pay, and I believe there's one other. Unfortunately, I don't have access to these being a non-US person.
Right.
So.
That's very dangerous.
So, like, every time Leo's late, he could Venmo me $10.
Theoretically,
I could put a swear complication on my watch.
Good, yeah.
Send her a nickel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what about some shortcuts have you've used since you hurt yourself, since you broke your ankle?
Well, I mean, one of them I mentioned, so I've got HomeKit scenes, which is really useful. So I created an emergency lighting scene. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, usually I'm okay to wander around the house in complete darkness, but surprisingly on crutches, this becomes more dangerous. So thankfully we have Philips Hue lighting pretty much everywhere. And then we also have a light strip plugged in under the side of the bed. And so I have emergency lighting. So if I tell my watch to turn on the emergency lighting, it will quite happily talk back at me and say 10-4, working on that.
Wow.
Or something along those lines. And then it will turn on the lights so that then I can find my crutches in the dark and get up and hobble to the bathroom, as needs to happen every so often.
Emergency lighting, that's a good phrase.
Yeah, so it just turns on a few lights. It turns them on red so it doesn't ruin my night vision.
Nice.
And also so it's less likely to wake up my boyfriend.
Yeah.
Because he still has to go to work, of course.
Now, is he a geek, I hope?
Yes, he is a
thank
geek,
God.
but he's not so much into the HomeKit stuff as I am. So We've installed buttons and things in places where
Yeah.
switches used to be, so that he doesn't have to get out his phone, and he is not a fan of talking to devices to get them to do what he wants or needs. So the buttons, we've got some Logitech pop buttons and some of the Philips Hue switches, and those are dotted around the house as needs be.
I've seen this. Stacey Higginbotham's husband has to put up with Stacey.
Right, as much does mine.
He says, "Can we just have?" And your husband, that's
Yeah.
right. Can we just have the blinds open manually, please? I don't want to have to talk to them.
So David Sparks also had this problem, my co-host on Automators. And what he did is he got the Lutron Caseta light switches. And he just replaced all of his light switches, which means that for people who want to press a light switch, they can press a light switch, but he can also have all of the automations.
It's brilliant.
Which I feel is a very good middle ground.
Stacey was just talking about that last week. That was her pick of the week.
The Aurora, is that what it was called?
No, the Caseta.
Yeah.
She had another one. Yeah, maybe
the
it was
Aurora,
another
and it's
one.
a feature, because your problem is always that
People
someone will
come in and
them
turn my
off,
lights off.
And then they don't-
that happens to me as well.
Yeah.
Or my boyfriend just unplugs the things that are turned on when he wants them to turn off. He's
I can't figure out how to turn it off.
Right here, you had to crawl under a table to unplug this, and there's a power button right on the front of it. Why didn't you just press it?
Yes. These relationships are not easy.
It's not easy.
No.
Yeah.
Not easy. My wife just says you can't die because I won't know how to do. I won't know how to turn anything on.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
That's also a solution.
Not to die. Yes.
So I have a question. So a lot of people were doing scripting and such automation through iTunes, and now we know iTunes is gone. What happens?
Thank God.
now? But then what happens to those people who are using iTunes to do automations?
Well, the great news for those people is both the music and the TV apps on macOS have had the scripting libraries from iTunes imported.
Nice.
So anybody using all of these Apple scripts, like the things available from Doug Scripts, I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name, can continue to download those and use them as they previously were. That won't be a problem. So that's great news for them.
So this is also an important thing for people to understand, that not only does Apple provide a lot of facilities in the operating system, but apps can also, as I think people know that with Siri Shortcuts, add additional capabilities. Are you seeing a lot of development? This was a kind of a semi-problem on the macOS with Apple Script. People needed to make their apps scriptable. Are you seeing developers really jump on this bandwagon?
Well, not so much on the Mac, though. Omni Group are doing a lot of things. They're creating a cross-platform JavaScript automation so that you can script any of OmniFocus, OmniPlan, Grapple, and Outliner with one script on all your devices, which I'm very much hoping to see a lot of other developers doing. Greg Pierce, who you had on recently, is doing that with drafts as well. He's going to be bringing actions to the Mac. They're also written in JavaScript.
Nice.
And JavaScript does seem to be very much the language for automation as it is now. Ironic, because JavaScript for automation built into macOS is nowhere near as stable as AppleScript.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't use ECMAScript or OS. Well, anyway, that's another story. But how about on iOS? You find developers on iOS are pretty savvy about this and are making sure they have hooks.
So a lot of developers last year were very keen to jump on the shortcuts bandwagon, but the problem with the shortcuts that they could donate, which I still think is the wrong word. I think somebody meant denote and typoed there. And then it just stuck.
Stranger things have happened, yes.
Oh, yeah. So the thing with the shortcuts that they had to donate last year is it was the I can do an action and I don't get input and I don't give output. And that was very problematic. So applications like Carrot, which is a really great snarky weather application, were able to work around this by copying stuff to the clipboard and then parsing things out of this mass that was on the clipboard, which was a nice little dance, but it wasn't very user-friendly. So for anybody who didn't know what they were doing, it was just like, what on earth am I doing here? Why does this not work? I give up. Now in iOS 13, not only will developers be able to pass input and output, they will also be able to request parameters, which means that all of these shortcuts that previously had to be built in by the shortcuts team. So, for example, adding a task to OmniFocus, you can specify a defer date, a due date, a project, notes, things like that. That previously had to be managed by the shortcuts team, which is in absolutely no way maintainable, thinking of all of the apps that are on the App Store. Now developers can do that, and they can donate those shortcuts to shortcuts. So,
good. I hope that this is widely adopted, because having that interoperability between apps is going to go a long way to making iPad a useful desktop tool.